Welcome to the High Agency Podcast with your host, Noah Ravoy. Before we can rebuild the West, we must be able to understand ourselves and have self-knowledge. My guest today advocates without apology for the embrace of beauty and elegance, good manners, and the conscious pursuit of desires as a means to experience self-awareness, spiritual awakening, and ultimately transcendence. My guest today is a gentleman mystic, Billy Redhorse. Welcome, Billy.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Ravoy. I appreciate the invitation.
It's one of the most interesting accounts on Twitter is your account for sure. And I have it marked below. If I suggest if you're watching this video while you're listening, go click on there and subscribe on YouTube. You're going to get some really interesting and deep things. I'm very curious about your name, Gentleman Mystic. How did you come up with that?
That was a culmination of 50 plus years of self-creation. I say often when I work with students or just talk in general, that the whole hippie concept from back in the day of finding oneself or discovering oneself, something about that always just seemed kind of sideways to me, so kind of wonky. And then I realized what it was. And that's very simply this. If I find myself, if I somehow manage to do that, I may not like what I find. So to me, the thing then was, instead of passively accepting whatever I found, getting rid of that which in my life I didn't like, that I no longer wanted to be there, that I inherited and just accepted as, par for the course, and then began constructing and building who I wanted to be. It was in the last probably 7 years maybe, that the gentleman mystic would be recognizable. And it was a culmination of 30 plus years of conscious destruction, assessment, and construction. And it's an ongoing process that will continue on until the day I return to the great round. And it's marvelous. It's a joy.
That's absolutely the right way, I think, to look at it as well. It's not find yourself, it's build yourself.
Hey,
build yourself into what you want to be. And I think a lot of the popular sayings in pop culture, things like find yourself or just be yourself, they're actually designed to undermine our agency and make us more manipulatable. If you say to someone, find yourself, then you can start to seed them with ideas of who they should be. And now you can control them based on those ideas. Whereas if you say construct yourself and the person has to take an active role in that, they're a lot harder to manipulate. And if you do manipulate them, they're more likely to notice it and escape.
I would like to agree with you on the last the last portion of what you said, but I don't know that I can. The obliviousness, if there is such a word, that my fellow man and our sisters are exhibiting, especially as evidenced with what has gone on in the last 13 months, is absolutely terrifying to me. And I don't engage in hyperbole. Hyperbole strains credibility. So if I say I'm terrified about something, I mean it. The degree of what would be the word? I guess just for a placeholder, we'll say acceptance of what is being shoveled in the media these days as abject fact and the science. And I'm not really even talking about the panic. I'm just talking about the way people are interacting in the world and interacting with their own world and in their people, the family in the world with them. So I don't know that most people out there are even aware that they're unaware. That has seriously, that's always been a case, but now it's so ramped up. It's like the guitarist in Spinal Tap. It's been turned up to 11. And
there's a saying that out of 100 warriors, out of 100 men, one is an actual warrior, 9 are maybe useful in the battle, and the other 90 shouldn't be there. Mm-hmm. And this ratio, more or less, this hierarchy ratio works out in society. There's maybe 1 out of 100 people that is somewhat awake. I don't even know if it's that high ratio. Mm-hmm. And there's 9 that know there's something up, but have no ability to actually figure out what it is. And 90% that just go along with whatever they're told to do. Yep. And it makes it very hard if you are in that 1% of people that figure out what's going on. You feel when you're younger, like maybe you're crazy, or maybe you're a weirdo. Or I was working with a young guy in his 20s. He was with me here, and we were coordinating some events in the U.S. We were the war room for a U.S. political event. And he said to me at a certain point, he looks over to me and says, "Are we the only adults?" Because everyone was acting like children. Mm-hmm. He said, "Are we the only adults?" And I'm like, "I think we are. We're the only ones that managed to maintain emotional stability through this entire thing." And it's most people never really grew up. We have no rites of passage for men anymore. Women grow up because they have this nature makes them grow up. Mm-hmm. They start menses, they have children. There's a certain amount of growing up that just happens naturally. But men, we always had these cultural, structural things that helped us to hit actual adulthood. Not just, you are now 18 years old, you're a man. It's, this is the test you have passed. You can objectively look at it and say, I can do these things. I'm a man. I passed this. I've defeated these enemies. I've built these things. I have wooed this woman, whatever it happened to be. And you could objectively say, you're a man. Mm-hmm. And men now, and it's the spirit of men that has been broken. Men now, they're basically a bunch of children, and they're just looking to daddy government to tell them what to do. Yeah. And they want a better daddy to come along. So they look to Daddy Trump. Better daddy will come along and save me. Oh, and now I'm disappointed in that daddy. Maybe another daddy will come. And it's this like cyclical looking for a messiah instead of solving your own problems. And us guys, we shout from the rooftops that something's wrong, and we give people specifics, but a lot of people, they just want someone to save them.
Yeah, and the thing of it is, people will accuse someone who has the eyes to see, well, you're great at pointing out the problems. Give me some solutions. Okay, I don't know that I have that many solutions, and I don't know that the ones that I have are that effective for everyone. Certainly they've been okay in my life, but to expect that there's a one size fits all approach to this is probably the problem, because it ties back into the whole education system in the West, which that's a rabbit hole in its own. When you start looking at the history of formalized government, I don't call them public schools, they're government schools. And realize that they want the average student, of which I certainly fell into the category, was to basically learn just enough to be productive, and beyond that, know your role and shut your mouth.
Yeah, and obedience.
Yes, learn obedience, learn to sit in lines, learn to follow instructions, and know that when you're finally worn out, you will be easily replaced by what is essentially a carbon copy of what has come generations and generations before.
Yeah, this is the public schooling system has definitely been a big part of the problem, and it is an indoctrination camp basically. Mm-hmm. And my son looks at them. He's homeschooled. He looks at the kids in the school behind a cage, and he says they're in child jail. Ooh. Is there a child jail? That's what he calls it. And I'm like, yeah. And he says, when does my friend get out of child jail? And I'm like, well, I think he gets out at 5 o'clock. And he's like, I see my son a little sad. He said, he has to stay there that long. He should be here playing with me and having fun, because the reality is about an hour of schoolwork a day, and the rest of it is designed intentionally to break your will. And so it's boring, purposely boring. We have this explosion of kids with attention deficit disorder when school went from I think it was 8 weeks or 12 weeks a year to being almost all year long. We got this explosion of attention deficit disorder. All it means is you're really bored with very boring things.
Mm-hmm.
You find the boring school boring and you don't want to go. And they actually want that because it's the highest agency individuals that find conformity boring. Low agency individuals, conformity is comforting because it means food's going to come at a certain time and someone's going to protect me and someone's going to tell me where I can go and what I can do. And they can live like a child. And the high agency people, they're like, this is boring. I could do so much more with my life. I want out of here.
Mm-hmm. And then there's the unfortunate ones that fall through the cracks that are the high agency, but they have no direction. They have no guidance.
Yeah.
And they end up even worse off because then they're the problem makers in a bad sense of the word. How many people have ended up in mental institutions over the years that just absolutely, there's nothing in the world wrong with them biomechanically, and even the software, the programming is not beyond repair. But it's much easier just to identify this person is a problem. Let's just get them out of the way. So they either end up in a mental institution, they end up end up institutionalized. Period. Whether it's mental institution, penal institution, or in upper management.
Well, you're even seeing this now in the news where there's an attempt to frame a belief that the government is not your daddy and your best friend and trying to look out for you as a conspiracy theory that is a mental illness that needs to be punished and that we need to drive these people out of society. And the next step is locking them up. And so this is a cycle. This will happen. People will rebel against it and it'll get pushed down again. And then a couple generations or so later, they'll try it again. I think there is some genetic component to a desire to not conform. And I do think they shot themselves in the foot with this COVID thing. I'm seeing a real bifurcation of people. I'm walking down the street with I got twins, little 1-year-old twins and a 7-year-old, and he'll be riding his bicycle around us and in circles, and I'm pushing them down to go to the park in the afternoon so that my wife has time to clean the house. That she likes to clean when we're all out. So I'll push them there after lunch and let the kids play. And people coming my way without a mask, they smile at me, they get direct eye contact, they look like humans, they like radiate warmth. And then I see these people with a mask on with the look in their eyes of you almost run over a deer and you see him on the road there and he's like scared and he's got these big eyes and he's afraid. They look just like that. They look like prey animals about to be killed because they believe that I'm going to cough on them or something and they're going to die of the COVID. And so they're deeply, deeply afraid that someone might cough on them. They look at my kid running around, screaming and yelling, like, he's not acting up, but he's being a boy. He wants to go and he wants to do a war cry and jump off of things. And, him and his brothers are howling at the sun. These daytimes are howling at the moon. They're sitting in the playground at the park, yelling at howling at the moon. And people look at them like, these kids have too much energy. They're too alive. They're too, they're too powerful. And I see other people, they want their kids doing the same thing. They see my kids and it gives them the chance to, okay, my kids can act like kids as well. Mm-hmm. And we're going to see this bifurcation. And I think the people that are shutting down, they're going to full on shut down. And we've already seen an increase in suicides. There are two ways to kill yourself. One is to shoot, one's to actually physically kill yourself. And the other is to never reproduce.
Yep.
And I think a lot of people are going to pick that second route. They're not going to kill themselves directly, but they're just not going to reproduce. And the people who do are going to be the people that have high agency, that are raising their kids to have high agency and that are saying, screw you to the government. Those are the kind of people that want to have kids. And it's going to, a couple of generations from now, I think it's going to backfire on them big time.
Yeah, but what do we do in the interim? This is a discussion I have with my beloved pretty much every day. I'm the gentleman mystic, she's the lady mystic, and we have our own individual work, and we also, back when people could be people, we used to teach together publicly and do ceremonies and other life-affirming things, and we are constantly, I've kind of likened it to the old H.G. Wells story, The Time Machine, where there was as you just, the words you used, bifurcation of the species, but to the Eloys and the Morlocks. And, one was this beautiful, just loving, but essentially soy, to use our term, helpless race that really didn't know what to do, that was always being preyed upon by the evil Morlocks that were ugly and brutish. And it just really, it goes back to what I said earlier, that slight disagreement I had with what you said, that I don't know that everybody sees that. And if they did see it, it should scare the ever-loving shit out of them, because this is not
agree. I agree that not everyone
supposed to be.
Yeah, I agree absolutely with you. Not everyone sees this. And, over time, I've gone from the idea of we got to save the West to the idea that we have to rebuild something afterwards. And what's out there, Rome has already fallen.
Yep. Basically,
what you are seeing in Washington, D.C. is the invasion of the Teutons into Rome. This is the invasions of Rome has happened. This is not. It's occupied by a military force right now. Rome was did not occupy themselves, but still, it's the same type of thing. The leadership is now occupied by a military force. Rome already fell. We just haven't seen the full chain reaction effect of it. And the way that we survived the fall of Rome was that instead of relying on the central government, we realigned ourselves internally and we started relying on each other. And we started building autonomous communities. We started building our own structures. And we actually intentionally knocked out bridges and roads and other things, so that bandits couldn't use them to get around and rob people, and armies of vagrants couldn't use them. And I think we're going to see that strengthening of the local community. Now, I'm living in Europe, and so the community spirit is a bit different. If you're in a small village here, you can be in a village where everyone in that village can trace their ancestry back to that village at least 1,000 years.
Wow.
There are villages that were part of the reconquest of the Iberian Peninsula from the Muslim invasions, and their ancestors were settled there, heavily armed, and told, if you can hold it, you can keep it. And they were incredibly outnumbered. During the Reconquista, during the initial part, there was up to 100 Muslim soldiers for every one European. But they were just stubborn. They were super, super stubborn, and they wouldn't give up. And they held that land. And if they lost a city, we'll take it back 2 or 3 years later. We'll try again. And they just kept doing it. It took them 700 years. That's 35 generations to reconquer the Iberian Peninsula. It was a intergenerational effort. And I think survival in this case, I don't think it'll be 700 years and 35 generations. But I do think that it's going to be a matter of reorientation for people. Instead of looking to big government to save them, they're going to have to look at mutual cooperation again.
I can remember explicitly speaking to my grandpa. This would have been 2004, and we were out in the hinterlands of the eastern U.S. just talking about things, and he was teaching me and showing me things and holding up mirrors to me and letting me do some of that self-creation that I was talking about, guiding me in that. And I remember looking at him and just explicitly saying, Grandpa, we are not going to see the results of the work that we are doing now or have done, are we? And he just stopped. And he kind of looked over at me and said, no, son, we're not. And he volunteered the answer to the question I was going to ask next, which is, he says, no, it's going to be at least 10 generations. It'll be at least 200 years before the seeds that we're planting right now will even begin to sprout up out of the Mother Earth and reach to the sun. So when he said that, it gave me I didn't like the answer. but it was an answer that I could accept. Like, okay, it goes back to the old saying of, planting trees that you'll never enjoy the shade under yourself. And some of our ancestors and teachings, there were ceremonies that took place that literally from the initiation of the ceremony until the culmination, it would take 150 years. And it was just this ongoing building process and growing process. And I think part of what is a detrimental thing in our culture right now is how disposable everything is. How we're so used to everything being immediate, and that goes against nature. It goes against Mother Life, and the fact that so many are, now granted, I like to be able to go into a restaurant and not having to wait 4 hours for my steak to show up. That's not the kind of silliness I'm talking about. What I'm speaking of is recognizing that life is a series of cycles, and it's a series of, all you got to do is look out your window right now. 4 weeks ago, it is very likely that what you saw outside looks substantially different from the way it does right now, just in 4 weeks, and how it will look 4 weeks from now, then 4 months, 4 years, 40 years, and dancing within those cycles and within those movements of life. And a lot of people, they for whatever reason, that's just not in their consciousness.
Yeah, I've been doing videos on the trifunctional system. It's basically the way that the European mind and culture was organized. And there are three groups. There is the first, second, and third function. The first function are about 1% of the population or less, maybe 1 out of 1,000. And they are the people that have, like you said, the eyes that can see. The people who can see the future, who are interested in what's going to happen in the next 200, 300, 400, 1,000 years. There are very few people who have any interest in that and have the capacity to actually see things into the future. And we may not know what's going to happen, but we start taking steps to make it. Instead of finding out what will happen, we make it happen, just the way instead of finding ourselves, we make ourselves. We don't find the future. We got to make the future. Okay. And, in the second function, they can see maybe like a half generation ahead because they're the warrior class. They got to protect us. They got to see what potential military threats are coming up. But most people are in the bottom class, the producer class, and all they need to know is, what do I plant this year for crops? And that's all that they've ever thought about for thousands of years. And to get them to think about very long-term things is very difficult. And when we had a functioning trifunctional system, that worked. We each filled our niche. The problem now is that two things have happened. Many of the people with eyes to see weren't giving the warnings that we should have given, at least not loud enough and clear enough. And those who don't have the ability to see it got into this consumerist culture where they thought, why invest in the 200-year future when I could consume today? And so they've consumed up all of our resources and consumed up, our future. And I think we're getting to a crisis point where they're going to say, maybe you're right. Maybe there's something to this, not eat all the food today because we might need something tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And I think we will start to see, we will start to see a cultural cycle, because it does go in a cycle. It's not the first time this happened. Rome fell. There was the Bronze Age collapse as well. These collapses happen. We always build back stronger afterwards, but it can take a long time.
A huge problem is when humans try to play God or goddess. People would think with my background and my name that I would be a raging environmentalist, and I am. I'm an environmentalist. Actually, to be more precise, I'm a conservationist. I want to take care of the Mother Earth. I want to take care of our air. I want to take care of our water. But I don't, for 1 minute, think that means we have to shackle what it is to be a human and to have communities and industrialization. A lot of what people are labeling as climate change and global warming, or back in the 70s when I was a teenager, it was the coming ice age. I mean, I wish they could make up their damn minds about what disaster we're having next year. A lot of what is being called these horrible things that are man-made, it's called weather. It happens. And when you can convince me that our gas-powered engines here are causing the solar or the polar caps on Mars to melt, then I'll believe that this is all our doing. Now, in keeping with the binary mindset of so many people, they hear me say that and they think that I want to pollute, I want to destroy, I want to rape, pillage, and burn. And that's a childish way of thinking. Grow up. And again, everything that we've talked about for the last 26 minutes has been basically the same topic. We're just coming at it from different angles and different points of observation. And to look back at schooling, what is supposed to pass for education these days, zero tolerance policies. There is an answer. There's one right answer, and every other answer is wrong. Well, in a society where people are unwilling to demonstrate agency, where they are unwilling to recognize that in that demonstration of agency that one has to have accountability, nobody wants to be accountable. Part of what has been trained out of us is the willingness to fail, to not be. I mean, it's one of the Hollywood mantras in all of the fake Navy SEAL movies. Failure is not an option. Well, yes, it is an option. It's not a desired outcome. It's not what we strive for, but it is an absolute possibility. You look at the Spartans, the 300, they prevailed for a long, long time, but they still got their asses handed to them eventually. There is overwhelming force that I don't care how big your heart is. I don't care how much your warrior spirit is. The body can't rise to what the spirit can hold. And so when we're told that we must not fail, we cannot fail, the acceptance of reality as it is not a condemnation to failure. Yeah. And that's something that so many people, again, it's the binary thing. Well, we can only, tell me, what should I think? Tell me. Oh, okay, I'll do that. I'll do that. That's safe. And if I screw up, it's because of you gave me wrong information. So they
want someone else to blame. Even
when you have someone else to blame, you're completely. I mean, your hands. You have no blood on your hands.
Yeah. Well, you said something very interesting. You said we have to preserve our land, our water, and that is very different how a lot of the environmentalists will say it. They'll say the land, the water, the earth, and this is very important. The words that we use, and you said ours, because these things exist for human use. Mm-hmm. We're preserving the land so our generations in the future can use it. We're not preserving it so that no humans can exist around it, so it can be empty. Mm-hmm. And I think that mindset change, that shift between the environmentalists tend to be basically anti-human. It's not that they love the environment, because they don't really behave in a way that shows love for the environment. They just hate humans. Yep. They hate themselves, and they extrapolate that to all other humans, or they were raised poorly, or they were raised around horrible people that they hate, and they extrapolate that out into the greater world. But it's not a love-based decision-making process. And I think this is something I noticed, that the most balanced people that I encounter are the people that say, yeah, I'm doing these things because I love the environment. I love my children. I love the future. I love my friends, and I want to take care of them. What we do now, we do because of love and not hate. And the individuals that are causing a lot of damage, they're not defining what they're doing by what they love and want to protect, but by what they hate and want to destroy. And I'm not saying hating things is wrong. But that is their primary driving force.
Well, remember back to your boyhood. There is some there is a primal satisfaction in breaking shit. And it's usually easier to break shit than it is to build something. And, unfortunately, a lot of the rage that we are experiencing in society, certainly throughout history, but especially evidenced these days, is, misdirected youth that have not suffered consequences, that have not been accountable, that feel like they're doing something, and they are. They are making a change. They are shifting perspectives in society. Ultimately, I don't think it's going to work out the way they want it to. I don't think it's productive to the goals that they may have. And I'm not even talking about politics, Mr. Roy. I don't talk about religion, and I don't talk about politics. It's pointless. What I'm speaking of is the spirit of what it is to be a human, and to recognize that we spend so much time wrapped up in distractions and petty arguments and just bullshit that we don't get to experience the very reason for our existence. And that is to experience existence, an existence of beauty, an experience of joy and self-creation and self-expression. But yet when somebody is only concerned about what their favorite sports team is doing, which, sports can be involve balls or and clubs and race cars, or it can also involve gavels and other accoutrement in whatever parliament or state house you care to look at. It is all. I love that you pointed out some of the Roman issues. It's all bread and circuses. It is all meant to keep us stupid, fat, and compliant, and to just stop. Recognize that we are individuals, and I am an individualist, but I can be an individualist in a tribe. I can be an individualist in a community, in a state, and all of these things can coexist. Again, I circle back to what I was saying with the either or, the binary thought process. And when people can begin to embrace nuance again, and subtleties and sophistication, and being willing to admit that they don't know everything and that they have made mistakes and they're wrong. I wish that I had gotten on the path that I'm on now when I was still a teenager, because I'd be light years ahead of where I am now. I'll be 60 this year. But okay, I can't change that. So what do I do now and going forward? And that's where the medicine is. That's where the magic is. I'm not apart from nature. I am a part of nature. I realize that anything I do that harms the environment outside my window is going to harm me. That doesn't mean that we return to the caves and wooden clubs, but it's just a matter of being intelligent and asking questions and being willing to experience things that other people say, no, you shouldn't do that. You should follow orders. Why are you being so difficult? Why are you being contrary? It's who we are.
Well, and I think we have to have a reciprocal relationship with nature. We take something from nature, we have to give something back as well. And the issue with it is to be reciprocal, not to follow one specific set of solutions. You mentioned earlier about in school, there's one answer to the question, and there's no other environment in life where you get out and there's one answer to the solution to the problem. If you're an engineer and you come up to a project, there's not one answer. If there was one answer, you wouldn't need the engineer. You just copy paste the answer into the drawing and then you're done. You have the engineer that's basically a problem solver. You have the problem solver there because there are many, many potential solutions, and the best one has to be ascertained for that situation. And it changes depending on the environment and the time and the technology. We don't know. People complain about higher technology making the world worse and more pollution and all of that stuff. And actually, it tends not to be like that. It tends to be, as you mentioned, cycles. Mm-hmm. New technologies are super polluting until we figure out how to make them work right. And then the amount of pollution they make drops way back down. And then we get a new thing that comes up and the pollution comes up again. The reality is in order to solve our pollution problems, we probably have to push technology farther ahead. But none of that works, since it's just a tool, without the right people holding the tool. Mm-hmm. The right people have to be using the tool. And there's this huge push to solve our problems with a bigger hammer, when the real problem isn't the hammer. Hit it with a bigger hammer is not the solution. If you're not hitting the right thing, if you're not doing the right technique and this type of thing, we need to, the focus that you have on how to be a better human, to be more in line with natural law, is how I often describe it. That's where we're really going to see return on investment. One of the watchers wrote, one of the solutions is to procreate and teach children agency, and start by learning the agency ourselves. Hey. And that's absolutely what it is. We're going to fix this through multiple generations of agency growth. That's the highest return on investment thing that we can do, is to teach our children and the next generation agency. Like I haven't limited it to just teaching my children. I have some young men and women who can't afford help, and I help them on my free time. Well, I don't really have free time, but I take some time out of my busy schedule to help them. When you have 3 small children, you don't really have free time, and run a business and other things. And I take some of my time and I help them. And people have asked me, why do you do that? Why are you helping people learn agency? When I found out my wife was pregnant, my first thought was, we found out it's a boy, and my first thought was, who is he going to marry? I looked at what's going on in the world today, and if culture keeps attacking women at the rate that it's been doing for the last 100 years, are any of them going to be worth marrying in another 20, 25 years when my son's interested in getting married? And I thought, instead of complaining about the problem, I'm going to do something to make it better. And so I started working on, teaching people agency. Basically, I'm teaching the parents that will eventually have kids that might end up marrying my kids, type thing. I started to be more careful about surrounding myself with the best quality men and women that I could, because my child's most likely going to marry a child of someone that is in my close social circle. If he doesn't go to school, he's not going to meet somebody there. He's going to meet somebody in my social circle. And so taking this long-term approach, looking a generation or 2 generations into the future, we can start making these small changes with leverage, and with compound interest, we end up with a big result in the end. And we're going to get a lot of return investment on that. And it's the kind of things that men like you and men that like I are doing that's going to save the world. It's not a piece of technology that's going to do it. It's not a change in government and politics. It's not a demographic change that'll fix it. What's going to fix it is people that can see, reminding people that they need to start looking too.
Mm-hmm. And the acceptance that it will not change tomorrow.
Yes.
It will not change in a decade. It will not change. I mean, you will begin to see movements, certainly. And by movements, I'm talking about just in the general arc of your life specifically, and the lives of those in your immediate orbit. I wish that we had a society that, if the rest of the world wants to go crazy and let it burn and rape, pillage, and all that they could have their own little island for that. And, the few sane people out there could say, all right, we're here to build. We're here to grow. We're here to experience what it is we're here for. And unfortunately, we don't have that option. So, a great challenge, and one that I and my lady talk about routinely, is, how do we navigate in this? How do we do our best not to get the crazy on us, but yet to still be able to reach out to other like-minded people, or as I like to say it, folks that smell like us, and to then avoid the pitfalls, historic pitfalls, but avoid the current pitfalls, and that takes all kind of form, whether it's regulation or just general craziness, like we were talking, you were talking about earlier with the masks. That's always a big topic of discussion with us, and very indicative of, to me, it's sad that people say that many of those wearing masks are sheeple. Quite frankly, I just think it's folks that think it's easier to go along and get along. So as I age, as I continue to mature, I try to have more of a spirit of kindness toward those around me, even those that I may vehemently disagree with. One of the things that saddens me greatly is when a public figure would pass that had maybe positions that other folks didn't agree with, and they're basically dancing on the person's grave. I have disagreed quite vociferously with a lot of what has gone on in this country in the last 30 years, certainly. But I never once have wished ill to any of our leaders. I would never, wish for an assassin's bullet. I would never wish for someone even to fall and break an ankle. I think that's childish. I think it's cruel, and I think it's unbecoming of what it is to be a refined human. And to see so many people that delight in the pain and suffering of others it's bad medicine. It's bad for our future. And
for a lot of people, they like to see pain and suffering, and they're looking for socially acceptable opportunities to revel in it. And it actually has nothing to do with the individual that passed. It has to do with their own desire to see pain and suffering, and then they get this socially acceptable opportunity. I do think that if you defeat an enemy, there should be a celebration, but it needs to be solemn, because you also need to respect the enemy as well. Mm-hmm. It can't be a party.
Well, one thing, perfect example of what you just said, Mr. Ravoy, is hunters. Obviously, again, with my background, I don't have a problem at all with hunting. I don't like trophy hunting. I think that's very cruel and not good medicine. But even with people that when they go out and harvest a deer, that they would take photographs with the animal, and there's just something about that that's so disrespectful. And with me, when you boy, the fur just went up when that happens. The truth's coming. A true hunter that is providing for his family, or even better, providing for his extended family. When the shot's taken or the arrow reaches out and touches the being, a prayer goes with that arrow. A prayer goes with that bullet. And again, I'm not talking about religion. Don't misunderstand. But it's a recognition that something is about to die so that I can live, and so that mine can also live. And there's a real honoring of that passage, that life. I can tell you numerous examples of animals that would step out and intentionally give themselves away to save their community. And don't get me wrong, I'm not a big hunter. I don't I'm speaking of people that I've been around in my life, and I've heard the stories, and to see that if you're open to life will talk to you, and we can dialogue in ways that most of our fellow 21st century folks can't even fathom. But to that disregard and disrespect for the giveaway is just, it breaks my heart. And to your point, when you're disrespectful of a human passing. Yeah, okay, I didn't live through World War II, so I don't know if I would have celebrated Hitler taking his own life. I don't know that I would have celebrated when Stalin or Mao passed, because I didn't live through what the pain and suffering that those men were directly responsible for. But I would like to think that I would be man enough to recognize that a bad thing was gone, and that's a good thing. But rather than to use the term again, to dance on their graves, like, what can we, how can we take our celebration that things are better and move from there and make something better from it?
Exactly. And you framed it exactly right. It's the celebration of no longer having to fear that enemy is no longer a problem for you and yours. Mm-hmm. You're not celebrating his death. You're celebrating the alleviation of a problem. And then and it needs to be solemn because it came with a death. This is about reciprocity. You take something, you need to give something in return. And that is, it can be a spiritual gift in return as well. You have to give something in return. And that return is the solemnness and the respect that you get when you would defeat an enemy. Mm-hmm. And I think the problem nowadays is almost no one has killed anything ever. Mm-hmm. of modern living humans. They've never had to kill the food they eat. They've never had to even see it happen. Every farm kid's butchered a chicken, or seen animals being butchered, and they understand that process, and it gives them a more solemn appreciation of life and death. You can talk to kids that grew up with hunting families or with farming families, and they have a more natural understanding of life and death. And people grow up in the city, it's almost like a Disney-fied version of reality. Mm-hmm. And that ends up, it's very unhealthy. It's not a serious thing, so they can celebrate it. They don't realize how serious it is.
One story that one of my teachers has told for many, many years, this was in, I don't know, probably the early to mid 90s. And she was out doing a teaching, and part of what was involved was a meet and greet after the fact. This is New York City now. She's sitting there, she's talking to people, and then this little girl came up. I think that's the story goes. She was about 6, maybe 5, and she looked at White Swan and said, "Have you ever seen a milk tree?" And Swan says, "What, sweetie? Have I ever seen a milk tree?" And the mother is aghast because she's standing behind the little girl, and the mother's trying to shush the daughter. No, I'm interested here. What are you talking about? She said, "Have you ever seen a milk tree?" "Well, no, I can't say that I have. Have you?" "No." "Well, okay. So, but what makes you think that there is such a thing as a milk tree, sweetie?" She says, "Well, when we go to the grocery store, the orange juice is on a shelf right next to the milk. So if there's an orange juice tree, there must be a milk tree." So this, again, as we've alluded to earlier, this separation from nature, we are apart from nature rather than in actual terms a part of nature. Something you were saying about those who have never had to at least witness the preparation of food, much less, actually, wring a chicken's neck or put a .22 caliber bullet in a cow's head for slaughter. That's something that at least everyone should witness. But what takes it even a step more into the I don't know what term I would use, the sad, I guess, is that, okay, they've never killed their food, but yet kids go out and stomp ants all the time, or pull wings off of butterflies, and ha 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 ha. And granted, we've all done it, but when you can recognize that, okay, I know I cannot move in this life without killing something. It happens every moment of every day. But to recognize that, how can I at least walk with a gentler step in this earth? I have a prayer that I say out loud every day when I walk out my front door. Stop, stand up, look at the sky. You know, if it's dark, I look up into stars. If it's daytime, I'm looking up for clouds and sunshine. Hey, to all those life forms which today I will kill, those which I kill knowingly and those which I kill in ignorance, I ask your forgiveness. Please forgive me. I grieve for you, and I celebrate you. I honor you, and I thank you. And I shall live my life today in such a way that your loss was not in vain. And if, nobody needs to do that, but to be able to have that kind of recognition that, death gives life. There is no life on this planet without the death of something else. And that I don't want to say embrace of death, because then, people take it to a morbid extreme.
It's it's the memory of death.
Yes.
To keep it in mind, because it is a part of reality.
Yeah. And, death comes for us all. I at least that's what I've seen around me. I haven't experienced it yet in this lifetime, but I have no reason to think, based on nature, that I'm going to.
I don't think it's going to forget me.
Yeah. Look the other way, puppy. So,
well, can you imagine if we lived in a society where people had that attitude? And I do think in the past we had that attitude was more common, where death was seen as a natural thing. Nowadays, not even birth is seen as natural. It's seen as a medical condition. You're shipped off to a hospital to be injected with drugs and cut open in order for your kids to come out like you have a tumor. And when we used to see these natural processes as natural, life is natural, death is natural, birth is natural, we had a lot less fear of them. And people, I've never seen, I don't remember when I was a kid, people being this scared of death. And I was surrounded by older relatives who are a lot closer to it than most people are today. They had zero, I remember my old relatives, they had zero fear of death. Now, mind you, they were in like their 80s and 90s, and they had lived good lives, but they had zero fear of death.
Yeah,
I remember my great-grandmother saying, looking at her watch and going, I'm like 93. She says, I know it's coming at some point. She says, at this point, I'm getting bored waiting.
There's a saying, it's kind of a joke, that it has taken on a new meaning for me in recent years of, the threat of a life, a life sentence has less and less persuasive power to me as I age. So, bring it on. Now, I absolutely, I love my life. I wouldn't change any decision I've made to get me to this point, because every decision I have made has brought me to you and I sitting here at this moment talking, and to for whoever may be listening or not listening. And I know that any even the slightest deviation could have, put a very different spin on where I would be right now. So with that in mind, I try to make my decisions a little more consciously now, and I try to think more in the terms of what you were speaking, years down the road. And I'm, like I said, I'll be 60 in a few months, and I'm still making things right from some of the dumb decisions I made as a young man. And so, I'm learning with everybody else.
No, and that's a wonderful attitude to have. I think it's a common thing that people say, well, what can I do? I'm just one person. And they don't understand that it's a leverage effect. The little things that you do now over time end up having a tremendous effect on reality and what happens. And if you approach life consciously and you have attention to what you do, you can throw it off in a good way or a bad way quite a bit into the future. You can make an effect through children, through people that you teach, through through these types of videos that we're making. This is going to have an effect on someone. That person will have an effect on another person, and you get this ripple out literally into infinity. The things that we do each day will affect the human race as long as there are humans around. And, maybe we find some other species, we affect them too by the things that we do. And now, if we approach it in that way, we stop being so frivolous and we start thinking a bit more about what we need to do and how we should be living. And, it's the old expression of there's no point in fixing the leak in the roof until it rains, but when it's raining, you can't fix it.
Mm-hmm.
So we start to look at these little problems that we have in life that might be small and start to say, I better resolve that thing. I better fix that thing. I better change that habit, because these little things I'm doing are going to have a massive effect in the long term. Like, I'm 42 and I have 1-year-old twins, and I don't want those kids to be able to physically beat me until they're at least 20. I want to be able to keep up with them, so I work out and I take good care of myself and I eat right. And I'm not just doing it for myself. I'm doing it because I know that I want to have an active part in their lives. But even more than that, I want to see my grandkids.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to just see them. I don't want to be, oh, there's grandpa. He lays in the bed all day. He can't move. Mm-hmm. I want to be able to move around and teach them things and pass wisdom on to them and start that and keep that ripple going. I've started a wave going. I want to build more energy into that over time and let it ripple out.
Well, a suggestion, as the boys are growing, use age-appropriate language, but start now. You tell them, hey, no matter how big you get, no matter how strong you get, your daddy will always be big enough to whip your ass. and you make it fun, but it also kind of it plants a certain seed of respect. Like, okay, even if maybe he's not as strong as I am, he's definitely got more experience, and he might be a little more treacherous. So, mm-hmm. Proper respect, respect the elder.
Yeah, it's funny because my oldest, he'll say, well, wait till my twin brothers get big enough, and then we'll tag team you 3-on-1. So he's got the idea that numbers give him an advantage.
Oh, you tell him, well, that'll almost be a fair fight. You might need to wait for another brother or maybe a couple of sisters.
Yeah. You're gonna need a few more siblings if you want to beat me that easily. And I said, and don't forget, you're assuming they're going to be on your side. You're assuming. You see, young men win through their physical might. Men in their middle age win through their skill, and old men win through their connections.
Hey, can vouch. Yeah.
we get more powerful as we get older, because we go from the capacity to beat a opponent to the capacity to beat multiple opponents through our connections and through the mark we've made in the world and the people that are willing to stand up for us. I see this all the time with, people will say, well, these old people, no one wants to come and see them. And I can't imagine myself ever being in a position where nobody loves me enough to come and see me. Not because I think I'm special and deserve it, but because I'm out there loving people all the time and helping people and teaching people things and, taking unfathered young men and giving them that masculine guidance they need. I'm creating this massive network around me of people who will come and see me when I'm an old man, and I won't be alone, and not just my own children, and in fact, if I'm on hard times, I know there are men I could call upon who would help me, because I help them, and I help them not in expectation that they'll help me, but I know they would if I needed it. Mm-hmm. And I think you mentioned earlier that the individualism, but also the ability to exist in a community is important. We are a social creature, humans. We need other humans. If you're a man and you don't have other men around you, you get weird. There's no other men to correct your deviations from healthy behavior. And I've seen that happen to men. I've seen men with tremendous capacity, men that I saw when I was a kid, and this, so I've seen it over some period of, 10, 20, 30 years. And I saw them not really have any male friends willing to tell them any honest truth. And they deviate from healthy behavior to the point where they lost everything. Mm-hmm. And so this is why, especially we men, we need each other. We need men we can trust. We need men who will be 100% honest with us and tell us when we're deviating from the healthy path. And that's worth its weight in gold.
Absolutely. I can speak from experience with that, because I was raised by a strong woman I was actually raised by my oldest sister, and a lot of what I now know to be what should be, at least, normal processes of being a teenager and a young adult, I really didn't have. And honestly, I didn't know what I didn't know, so it was no great loss there. But getting out on my own and being self-responsible and recognizing that the way things had been presented to me about A or B, that's a way of looking at it, but there's not knowing that there was something amiss about that at the time. It's like, okay. Yeah, and that's kind of what I was alluding to earlier when I said that, I'm still course correcting on things that I did as a youth that still need work. And the sooner that true masculinity, if we want to use the word of the day, or the word of the eon, actually, it does come down to men being able to be men and recognizing that there are, I have often wondered about, how does a single father raise a daughter with no female in their life? I mean, just think about it. One of the great examples I've heard many times is a single mother raising a young boy. Well, how does a mother know to teach a young boy how to pee standing up, or how to shave? And it may seem like a trite example, but those kind of influences make a difference. They do, as you said earlier, they ripple out. And if you don't know what you don't know, then it's the second and third order consequences are profound, to say the least.
Well, we used to have it's single motherhood. It was usually through being widow, but a woman raising a son is not a new thing in history. But we used to live in small communities and tribes, and my family was very, very tribal. They had like a book where they kept a list of who was in the tribe and what the rules to get in. They had very specific rules to marry in, and they were basically cultivating high agency human beings over a period of about 450 years. And they have records of all of that. They took the instinctual dramatic tribal beliefs that they had and then incorporated it into a written form. So I have from the written form onward, we have that, but it was older programs. If something happened to a man, his sons would get raised by his brothers or his brother-in-laws. There would always be men around in the tribe. If there was it was a thing of honor to take on an orphan in the tribe and say, okay, look, I'm going to teach you stuff. I'm going to adopt you. You're going to become my kid now. And we don't have that anymore. The single mothers are not just single mothers. They're surrounded by other single mothers. Yeah. And there's no men anywhere around. Like we talk about this in the ghetto, it happens to white people too. It happens wherever there's single moms, because married couples, the wife doesn't want her husband going over to a single mom's house, helping the boy, because there's a conflict of interest there. And, she doesn't want to share the resources that could go to her kids, and he might not want to either. And plus, we just don't have that communal values anymore. We don't see each other as important. And part of that's, big city living. If you're sharing a city with 1 million people, you're alone. If you share a village with 200 people, you got 200 people that everybody. You can be in New York for 10 years and not know anyone's name. You live in a small village, and within a couple of days, everybody lives there. Mm-hmm. And we've lost that to a large extent. I think a big part of solving the problem that we have is going back to that. So we don't have to go and live in a small, rural, isolated village. In my building, we talk to each other. I live in an apartment, and there's 8 units here, and we talk to each other. We're supposed to wear masks. Nobody wears masks. We just go and see each other, visit each other at our houses, break the quarantine number of people you're supposed to have in the house, and nobody says anything. Nobody complains. And the cops can't go, oh, we saw a lot of cars parked out there, because that's where they're supposed to be parked. They're in front of our apartment.
Mm-hmm.
And that gives us this kind of escape from the rules. We found a workaround around the rules. And we did this unintentionally, just because I'm myself, and especially one of the other guys in the Russian man, is very, very outgoing and unafraid of breaking rules, And so we're a little outlawish. So we don't care about the rules. And I think that's the future. Little communities where you say, we're going to shut the main door to the outside. We're going to shut the gate to the outside. And we're under quarantine. Fine. We're under quarantine together. The kids can play together. The women can help each other, because women need other women as well. And the men can take care of each other. A lot of couples getting divorced right now because they're forced to spend time with each other that they never did before. Mm-hmm. Your spouse can't satisfy all your social needs. Men need men and women need women as well. And we've been pushed out of that potential, and that's causing a lot of friction in marriages as well. And I think people are going to have to decide that they want a solution to the problem, and they're going to have to solve it. And we're going to have to learn to break rules and not get caught.
And we're going to have to learn how to make sure there's some mechanism to actually functionally change those rules too.
Yes.
I am not an anarchist in the pure sense of the word, but one of the big failures of governments or the governing bodies of societies, and it's exceptionally prevalent here in the United States. I don't know how it is in Europe so much, but it seems like once an idea is given the force of law, it never goes away. Even if it's very rare that you have a law created that at some point it's brought back and considered again. Does this, it served a purpose 20 years ago when it was written. Does it still serve a purpose today? In the rare event that something like that even is considered, usually what will happen is they'll just pile another law on top of it. So you have this ever expanding monstrosity that eventually has to collapse under its own weight. And I think that's kind of the point that we are fast approaching. But to be able to go every few years and reassess, should a rule, should a law, should a mandate be in place? Okay, we'll do it again, and then we'll come back and look at it later. But there's the unwilling. Some people look at that as job security. The more enforcement there is, the more a law is written. I get a paycheck. And when the people responsible for doing the administration of these kind of things, their paycheck depends on it, they're never going to get rid of this stuff. So
if you see tax law is unnecessarily complicated, and you check who is lobbying for it, and it's the accounting associations lobbying for it and getting involved in helping write the complicated laws, because the more complicated they are, the harder it is for ordinary people to fill their own taxes out, and especially if you have a small company, and the more sense it makes to then go to a tax accountant and just pay them a lot of money to solve the problem that they created. And it is very often, it's that kind of rent seeking where you create a problem so that you can solve it later on. Can you imagine if the two things would fix this? One is all laws sunset 1 year after the government that implemented them has been dissolved. So each presidential cycle or Congress is dissolved for the next Congress 1 year later. So laws would last maximum 5 years, let's say. You could even say sunset after 5 years. And then the new Congress would have to take a look at, do we like this law again? Yes or no? Well, this law has been around for 50 years. Let's repass it again. The other thing would be to have a veto, a public veto. Not that the public could directly vote that we like the law. It'd be the other way. We vote we don't like the law. And if 20% of the population says this, no, we don't like this law, then we veto it. No one's going to say, okay, no murdering people. And people are going to, yeah, I'm vetoing that. And that's not going to happen. But a lot of laws that are conflicting with people's natural rights, those will get vetoed by a significant portion of the population. And the government, people say, look, this law is just too complicated. We don't like the way it was written. Simplify it, make it more clear. It's giving you too much power. A lot of times they'll take a law about something very simple and they'll write into it a whole bunch of hidden powers. Mm-hmm. And, a public veto like that would make a big difference. They kind of do that in Switzerland. They have, all laws come up for public review, all major changes to the law. But something like that in the US would make a big difference to preventing excessive laws being built. You should be able to know the laws of your own country, but your average citizen not only doesn't know the laws, but they break about 3 federal laws every single day.
Yeah. The idea of federalism is, I think it's a pretty good thing. Letting things be sussed out at the state level, and to one degree or another, we've actually seen that in play with this whole panic thing. I'm sorry, I refuse to call it a pandemic. It's a manufactured panic.
I agree.
And certain states have weathered it poorly. Certain states have weathered it quite well, regardless of what positions were put in place. But when the states, the government, you brought up Switzerland or Sweden, or we'll say Portugal because that's where you are. Portugal has a representative in Washington, D.C. The state of Georgia, where I live, does not. What are you talking about? Well, when the 15th Amendment was passed, where the voting of or the installation of state senators was moved into voting from the public or by the public, rather than it being the senators being appointed by the state legislature. Effectively, Georgia has no representation anymore. It's all, supposedly the people, and that's part of where the problem is with the whole, the triform of government that we have. Nobody, and again, we're going on a tangent here that I'm out of my pay grade, and I'm just expressing my frustration with what I know to essentially be a good system that has been so screwed up because of lack of forethought and only concern for party over people.
Well, and this is why our agency has been undermined for so long, is because high agency men like you and I, we recognize this automatically. But if you had a population that was high agency, and I believe the population that formed the United States with a lot higher agency than the population that currently occupies the land, because they were in a survival situation, a life and death situation, and low agency people don't survive those kind of situations. You die off if you don't think ahead about the future, because you make stupid decisions, you don't prepare for winter, that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. The current population is mostly made up of dependents of one form or another. They either work for the government, they get free money for not working for the government, or they're dependent on one of those first two groups. And so we have this system now where we have a lot of people get to make decisions that have very low agency, and that are very easy to undermine their agency because there's no natural pressure forcing them to think about their future. And when you think about the future, it's like exercising the brain. It doesn't just affect your physical survival. You start thinking about other things as well. You start thinking about your spirituality more. You start thinking about, death is coming. What's after death? And these kind of things that you don't tend to really think about when you're living this hedonistic dependency lifestyle. And so we've had that undermining, and really the key to that is we need to rebuild up agency. And I'm a very big believer in that ripple effect. And so, I wrote a book about teaching people agency. And this is a textbook. This is designed to be used in groups to teach people agency. And those people, they're not going to just go out and exist as high agency people. They're naturally going to take what they learn and spread it to their children, to their families, to their friends, to their colleagues and workmates. They're going to apply the concepts in their work. You know, a company that focuses on hiring high agency people will always beat the company that hires low agency people, because you'll be able to outthink them. You'll have less overhead. You'll have less mistakes being made. The mistakes that you make will get fixed instead of allowed to fester. So I think what I'm doing is creating this ripple that's going to affect the entire pond. And I mean, maybe a better way to describe it is I'm starting a fire that's going to burn up all of the refuse at the bottom of the forest, so that we can have new growth come back again. And this is really going to change the world. We don't know the exact path of how to get where we want to go. We're not even sure where we want to go. But I know that there are processes that we can follow and clear thinking that we can follow that will allow us to discover that path as we go, and allow us more than discover it, allow us to create it.
I have a saying whenever I teach publicly, or if I work with students intimately, that what we do, what I do, I never proselytize ever. But I want to function in such a way that someone looks at me and says, "Red Horse, I don't know what it is you got. I just know that I want it." That is the way. Well, that is the way. Period. Because then that, number one, that it demonstrates to me that I am doing something right, and that people see value in it. And as far as I'm concerned, one of the most important components or constituents of a high agency person is value, being valuable to their community, to their family, and most importantly, to themselves. Because if you have no self-value, you have no power, you have no agency. You might have authority. There are a lot of people, and most of the government is made up of people that have no power, but they have authority. And because they have authority, people mistake what they do and the edicts that they make as being demonstrations of power. And that's absurd. It's nothing of the kind. But I don't want to say that low agency people are cowards. I'm just going to say that the average low agency person is ignorant. And ignorance is a curable disease. Most people, if you were to sit down with them and just talk and to be able to discuss things without some kind of external pressure, familial pressure. Well, you don't want to be one of these contrarians. You're going to attract attention to the family. Well, it's in our DNA to want to express. It's in our DNA to want to create and to be seen. And a low agency person is screaming to be seen. And unfortunately, they're usually, when they finally do get seen, they're seen for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah, they're seen for their conformity. That's where we get all the value, our virtue signaling from. What I found a lot of times is, if you lead the way, the fearful people start to come out of the woodwork and start to go along with what you're doing. And pretty soon they're capable of actually influencing and inspiring other people. A great example is there's two things. One, the country I live in, you can carry a pocket knife, and I always carry a large pocket knife, which is what you're allowed to keep here. And I always encourage my friends to do the same. And I'm surprised how few people actually. I'm an advocate for being as armed as you are legally allowed to be in the country you live in, and they're not interested in that. Well, I get to the park, and they've put barriers all around the children's play area, and they've taped it off, and it's police tape. It's technically a crime to remove it. And then out comes the knife, off goes all the tape, and all the barriers are gone. My kids rush on and play. And all of the parents who are around and spread out across the park, social distancing, within 20 minutes, everyone's standing around the playground. Their kids are playing together, and the adults are talking like we used to do before the pandemic. It was a really friendly neighborhood with each other. Everyone talked to each other. But somebody needed to come and lead the way. And even when I leave, they're still doing it. You just break the ice, and then people start to go along with that and recognize they can exercise their freedoms. And you do it enough times over time, and you don't need to be pushing it anymore because someone else starts getting brave and doing the same thing. Mm-hmm. And I think for those of us that can see, leading the way, breaking that ice, showing people that they don't have to be afraid, that they can think, and that they can demonstrate agency, and showing the benefits of it. They see my kids are happy. They're on the playground. They see I'm not afraid like they were. I'm just, that's my natural personality. I have almost zero anxiety. So I just don't, fear doesn't click in on me, sometimes to a negative degree, because I don't get fear of things that I should have a fear of sometimes. But it just ends up being, that liberates the other people around you. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what the type of people that we are. That's our job in society, is to say it's okay to live.
Yeah, you get, people want permission. Okay, we're giving you permission. Go live your life. And yeah, some people are going to have to suffer slings and arrows. I had with all of the increasing insanity that we've all shared over the last few months, I actually hit a breaking point about a week, 10 days ago, I guess. I saw a gentleman, I believe it was in the Netherlands. He's out in a field, a park or something, with he's on his bicycle, and he's surrounded by about 4 or 5 cops. And it's obvious they're not happy with the fact that he's out and he doesn't have a mask on. And then he gets off his bike, and there's no threatening body positioning at all. And then one guy just rears back and hits him right upside the head with a billy club. And it had to have been a rubber hose, because if it was wood, it would have killed him. That's how hard it was. And the blow looked like it hit right across the side of the eye. And the guy is like, "What are you doing?" And he's putting the bike between him and the other cops. And then another one comes in and starts hits him. And I saw that, and it's like, I a circuit breaker went off. I said, I got to take a break. So I basically unplugged from Twitter for about 2 or 3 days, even to the point that some of my dear friends, in particular Chief Chuck Whitworth, did a welfare check. All right, just want to make sure you're all right, because you're usually here all the time. And somebody has to be willing to take that first blow. And when it happens enough, then other people are going to stand up, and more people are going to take the blow. And it's happened throughout history. It's happening probably right now somewhere. But there comes a point where no más, no more.
What the Portuguese here where I am, they say like this. They said the officers that go around, they also live in our neighborhoods, and we know where they live, and we know where their family is, and we know where their house is, and we know which car is theirs. And because they have to live with us, we have to have a mutually respectful behavior. If they don't respect us, not everyone will do this, but you hit a few people like this, somebody's going to go, I know where you live, and I know how to start a fire. And there's going to be problems. And, I struggle to have sympathy for people that have a parasitical relationship with their neighbors and then complain about their neighbors retaliating. I just, I can't feel bad for the person.
The whole thing of I'm just doing my job, that's Nuremberg put that to rest.
Yeah.
And, for any of the young bucks out there that don't know what the hell we're talking about,
you go look it up so you don't find.
You need to check up your history here. I was just doing my job. Well, then you need to get another job. Because it's just, that's just bad medicine, and it's an excuse that holds no water anymore, especially in this day and age.
Well, and we, what happened in, say, the 1990s, nobody knows what happened. There was no video cameras everywhere. Nowadays, it happens. You get videoed if you're an officer and you're beating the crap out of somebody. It gets videoed. You will be identified. Reddit is like they have guys that are magic at identifying people. You're going to get identified, and you're either going to get criminally prosecuted, or you do this kind of stuff often enough, and there will be repercussions. The problem is that there are legitimate laws that are, we shouldn't be running around murdering each other, raping each other, robbing from each other. There are legitimate laws and there are illegitimate rules. I like to define the two as separate. The rules are arbitrary and man-made, and these are not things that are legitimate. And what makes a law is that it comes from natural law, that it is a part of what we know is naturally wrong. And what's happening is they've conflated the two, and then they've used the rules to attack us. And so people are going to start having disrespect for the laws as well. And that's the problem. You mentioned you're not an anarchist. I absolutely agree with that. When I say break the rules, I don't mean break the laws. And the thing is that that small distinction is lost on a lot of people. And, sometimes I forget that not everyone recognizes there's a difference between the two. And so we have to keep doing our job. Our job is to see what we can see and to let people know. And I think that that's also the place where you fit as well in society. And we're doing our job. More and more people are doing the same thing we're doing. That's basically the brunt of anything of value on YouTube is men like us and women as well. What I call first function people who are shamanistic, seeing the future, almost like who you might call, some people call it like a priest type mindset. I used to be a minister myself, and I realized I can help people.
We have things in common then, my friend, that I did not know.
Yeah. I used to be I actually was an ordained minister at 15 years old. So, and I was, my wife almost ended up as a missionary, but I said, no, we're getting married, and roped her back over to stay with me. But it was, it is those people who are drawn to that, to helping other people, but also because we have vision and we see that we need to build what we want and not just sit around watching it collapse. I was asked by a client today, should I just sit back and watch the collapse of civilization? And I'm like, if you do that, your name will never be remembered. You'll just be forgotten. You'll be nothing. I think what you can do is you can sit here with me and try to figure out and start acting on how we can make civilization rebuild itself, how we can, whatever path that takes, we don't know. But what we know is we know the right processes for us and our people to survive. And then when there's nothing left, we'll build on the rubble. Somebody survived the fall of Rome, and they built on the rubble. And that's what we're going to do. It's been a wonderful time talking to you. I'm going to have to let you go now because I'm actually starving.
Oh, you've eaten once this month. That's enough.
Once a month, you eat big enough meals. They call it the warrior diet.
Yeah, they call it the idiot diet, I think.
there was a Scottish man that went for a year and 3 months without eating. He started off at almost 400 pounds, and he ended up at about 180.
Wow, I'm surprised he had that much left after a year. But
it was under medical supervision, and it was pretty. It's the longest fast that anyone's ever done. I have no interest in attempting that.
Well, enjoy your meal. Go wrestle with the boys, and seriously, go ahead and start planting the seeds now. No matter how big you get, your daddy will always be big enough to whoop your ass.
Thank you very much, Red Horse. Take care. And for all my audience, have a great evening.
Thank you for watching our video, and I hope it inspired you to take action in your life. Please subscribe to our channel and like this video to get more agency building content. The real secret sauce is in our newsletter. Click on the link in the video description below to sign up. I promise I won't flood your inbox, and anything that we do send you will be of high value.